Hey everyone, so today we are starting a new system. We are starting the integumentary system, which is just a fancy name for the skin. And so today we're going to be talking about the structures of the skin as well as the functions of the skin. And then we will do disorders on a separate day because there's a lot of those. So let's start by talking about the three main layers of the integumentary system. First, we have the epidermis, which is the outermost layer of the skin, which is basically what you can see and feel when you're looking at a person. It has 5 layers within that, which contain melanocytes, which are the cells that help give our skin color. And then it also has an outer layer of flat, kind of scale-like cells that flake off. And this is called our stratum corneum, which you can think of like corn flakes. It flakes off, stratum corneum. And this is when we talk about like rubbing up against something and how we lose millions of skin cells every single day, but you don't even realize that you're losing them because they are rapidly regenerating. Our epidermis is made of that epithelial tissue, which if you can remember back to the beginning of the semester, we talked about how epithelial tissue is able to regenerate very quickly, which is why if you were to only get a cut or a scrape on your epidermis, it usually heals really quickly and you don't even bleed or anything like that. So your epidermis is that outermost layer. So here I have our 3D model, and we are looking at this top layer here, which makes up the epidermis. Now, if you look closely, you can see that there are multiple layers that make up this top section, but altogether, they're known as the epidermis. Now, next we have our dermis, which is the inner layer of the skin, and it contains lots of blood vessels, nerves, lymph vessels, hair follicles, and glands. It makes up a huge chunk of our skin. It makes up this whole section here. So from here to here is your dermis. It's a really large section. And so all of this stuff in here that you're going to learn about is held within that dermis. And then lastly, we have our subcutaneous or hypodermic layer. Sometimes it's referred to as subcutaneous, meaning below the skin, or sometimes it's referred to as hypodermic, meaning below the dermis. But it is the innermost layer, and it is made up of fat and connective tissues that contain our really large blood vessels and nerves, and it kind of acts as like an insulator to help regulate our body temperature. So if we look at our 3D model again, this layer down here that kind of looks like it has like corn pops or cereal or something down here, that is your adipose tissue, this bubbly fat looking layer, and that makes up a large majority of that subcutaneous or hypodermic layer, so the bottom third down here. Within our dermis, we have lots of different appendages, and one of those is our hair. And our hair is made up of many different structures itself, including things like the cuticle, the cortex, the medulla, the root, the shaft, the hair follicle, the papilla, and the erector pili muscle. And all of these are very important, and you're going to need to be able to label each of them. So the hair cuticle is actually the part of the hair that kind of sticks right below the skin. So it's literally right underneath our skin, and it's the outermost protective layer of the hair. Then we have the cortex, which is the middle layer, and this is what you start to see when you actually get split ends. Then you have the medulla, which is the innermost layer of the hair, and that is not part of what you see. The root is the part of the hair that is located within the dermis. So way down inside the dermis is the root of your hair. And the shaft is the part of the hair that you see that is non-living. So it's the part of the hair that actually sticks out above the skin. A hair follicle is the tiny sac that actually holds the living part of the hair, which is located deep within the tissue of the skin. The papilla is the white tuft of skin, which is on the end of the hair. So if you've ever like pulled out a hair and there's a little white dot on the very end of your hair, that is the papilla. And then your erector pili muscle is actually this diagonal muscle here on the screen. I don't know if you can see it. There you go. And this is an angle. So it's an angular muscle that attaches to the skin and to the hair. And when it is it's sensitive to things like cold and pain and fear and all kinds of different emotions. And basically, when that erector pili muscle contracts, it pulls your hair up and causes that goosebump effect. And part of the reason that that happens is when you're cold, you start to get what we call chill bumps. The reason for those is because that erector pili muscle contracts. It pulls your hair to stick up because hair that is sticking straight up actually traps in more warmth and keeps us warmer. So that is why when you're cold, you get chill bumps, because it's actually your body's natural reaction to cause that erector pili muscle to contract, to cause your hair to stand up in order to trap in some of that body heat and try to keep you warm. If we look at our image here, these diagonal pieces are the erector pili muscles. Next, we have our nails. And in our nails, we have many different parts. You have the nail plate, which is the actual visible part of your nail. Then you have the nail bed, which is actually the skin located beneath the plate. And then you have your matrix. And the matrix is actually what creates new skin by pushing out the old dead skin to make the nail bed. So the matrix is kind of this part here that forces your nail to grow and creates new skin. And then you have your cuticle, which is what rims the base of that nail and what we always push back when we go to get our nails done. Next, we have two different types of glands, and one thing that the glands produce that we're going to talk about. First, you have sudoriferous glands, and sudoriferous is a fancy name for our sweat glands. And the easiest way to remember that is the word odor or door sounds like odor, and that is your sweat gland. So sudoriferous is the sweat glands. And we don't naturally smell. The oil that's actually secreted from our sweat glands does not naturally on its own have a scent. However, when our sweat combines with the bacteria on our body, that is where the body odor smell comes from. So on your screen, you can see we have your sweat gland down here. It's this curled up looking piece, and then it goes all the way up through the dermis, all the way to the epidermis, and ends at a sweat pore, which is what our sweat actually comes out of. Then you also have sebaceous glands, and sebaceous glands just produce oil to help keep our skin moisturized and lubricated and things like that. And that is located here, this purple piece here. And you'll notice that sebaceous glands are usually right next to our hair follicles and our hair shafts. And the reason for that is because your sebaceous glands actually produce something called sebum, which is just a fancy word for oil. So that helps to keep our hair shiny and our skin moisturized. And so you have two different types of glands. Here on our model, these curly pieces down here, here, and here, those would be sudoriferous glands. And then I'm trying to see if they have sebaceous glands on here. I'm sure they do, but I'm not seeing them right off. So next, let's talk about the functions of the integumentary system. We have 6 main functions that are in the image. If this is easier for you to remember it this way, you basically have protection, secretion, sensation, heat regulation, excretion, and absorption. And what all of that means is your skin is obviously there as a way to protect the rest of your body. It's the first thing that comes into contact with everything in the environment. It also helps to excrete oils and waste products from the body and toxins and things like that. It helps in the production of vitamin D when we absorb natural sunlight, and it's able to process that into a vitamin that we can actually use in our body. It also helps with the regulation of our body temperature. Think again about that erector pili muscle and the trapping in of our body heat. And then it also helps with sensory perception. Later, we're going to talk about the nervous system, and we know that we have nerves all throughout our skin that are helping us be able to sense the environment around us and react to things like cold and heat and pain. And then lastly, it also serves a purpose of storage, because it does store many different vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that we need for our everyday living. And then also each structure within our skin has its own functions. So the epidermis layer provides a barrier to infections and helps to regulate the amount of water that is released from the body. Think about when we sweat, how we are helping cool down our bodies by producing moisture, which is then going to evaporate off of us. The dermis helps support the epidermis and enables the skin to thrive, and it's also the home of many of those important organs within the skin that we just talked about. And then your subcutaneous or hypodermic layer helps with temperature control. That adipose tissue is very important in helping regulate body temperature, as well as providing a passageway for our nerves and our blood vessels. And as you can see here on the screen, down here in this subcutaneous or hypodermic layer, we can see the red blood vessels and the blue nerves kind of intermingling in there, and they really run all through the subcutaneous layer. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the function of our appendages, which are those things like our hair, nail, and glands. So our hair helps with protection and regulation of body temperature. That also helps facilitate perspiration. Our nails help protect the tips of our fingers and to help us make very precise movements. Think about how when you have long nails or very short nails, it can be very difficult to get really precise movements. So somewhere in between, our nails help us to be able to grab things and to type and to do all these things that we don't really think about, which would be much more difficult without nails. And then your sudoriferous glands discharge our sweat, and your sebaceous glands help to secrete sebum to help protect and lubricate the skin. That is everything for the functions of the integumentary system and the structures of the integumentary system. Make sure that you go ahead and study those flashcards for today and continue working on your medical terminology chart, as well as starting to think about your 3D skin model. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you will find out when you go look at our assignments for today. The 3D skin model is due on Friday, so you have a week to kind of get your supplies together, figure out what you want to do, and put it all together and submit either a short video or photos of your completed project. If you have any questions, as always, text me or email me, and I hope you have a great day.